On a small, forgotten farm, where the wind whispers secrets and the earth seems to carry ancient stories, lives a horse with dark, almost black fur. His name is Shadow, an animal with an imposing appearance, but whose eyes, with a melancholic shine, betray his true nature. A soul marked by mysteries and a life full of suffering. Shadow is an imposing horse, with robust muscles and a thick mane that sways gently in the wind. His feet, strong and fast, are used to gallop on the vast plains that surround the farm. But the land he walks on is not just soil and stones. She keeps deep secrets. Every day, at dawn, Shadow begins his journey, not to run freely through the hills or away from the bonds of the farm, but to do something peculiar, something that scares the few who still dare to observe the animal. With a strange and determined calm, he heads to a specific point in the field, a remote place where no one else dares to go. There, he stops, as if he felt an inexplicable connection with that place. The field is lonely, dominated by a large ancient tree, its roots exposed as if they want to reach the heart of the earth. And next to the tree, a simple, neglected tomb. At first, the few residents of the nearby town thought it was just a coincidence, but it soon became a daily ritual. Every day, at nightfall, Shadow stood in front of that tomb and stared, as if he were waiting for something. His breathing, calm, contrasted with the fear that gesture provoked. Some said he was possessed. Others believed the horse was going crazy. But no one knew the truth. Shadow wasn't just a solitary animal. He had a story, and the mystery of his connection to that tomb was yet to be revealed. The horse's eyes, often so empty, now seemed to carry a deep sadness, as if they knew something that no one else did. Something that, until that moment, remained hidden in the darkness of the land where he stopped every day. Shadow's story begins long before his connection with the mysterious tomb. He was not born on an isolated farm, nor was he raised as a working animal. In fact, the horse had a promising start, being the pride of a renowned horse breeder in the neighboring town. Since he was a puppy, Shadow was different. He possessed an intelligence and grace that enchanted everyone who saw him. His owners, especially old Charles, saw in him a bright future, perhaps the best horse they had ever bred. For many years, Shadow was trained for competitions, where he always stood out, surpassing other horses with impressive ease. His speed and agility were unmatched, and he became a legend in the region. It wasn't just his physical strength that was impressive. There was something else in his gaze, an intensity that left everyone around him with an uncomfortable feeling, as if he knew something that no one else did. However, like all stories of greatness, Shadow's luck began to change. One fateful day, during an important competition, the horse suffered an accident that left him with a serious wound on one of his hind legs. The injury didn't appear to be something that would stop him from continuing, but veterinarians said otherwise. The recovery would be long and full of uncertainty, and Shadow would need rest so he could get back to what he did best. But what really happened was that time passed and the horse was forgotten. Charles's farm went into decline. With the breeders losing interest and the lack of money to invest in Shadow's care, he was sold to a new owner. The new owner, a man without much experience with horses, didn't know how to deal with Shadow's size. The horse was placed on a small, isolated property, far from the city, and became neglected. His body, once strong and imposing, began to wither. The pain of the injury and the loneliness affected him deeply. What no one knew was that, on that farm, Shadow would find something much deeper than simple abandonment. He would discover a secret buried in the earth, something that connected his soul to that place in an inexplicable way. It was there, in that lonely place, that Shadow began to visit the tomb every day. At first, it was just a curiosity, but as the days went by, something supernatural seemed to surround him. He began to stare at the tomb as if searching for answers, as if he felt a connection he didn't understand. The horse, which was previously unbeatable, now seemed to be consumed by a mysterious force, something that attracted it to that dark field. As the horse continued its routine, the city, now far away, began to notice something strange. Those who passed by on the road to the farm commented on the constant presence of Shadow, standing there in front of the grave. No one dared to approach. Some said the horse was possessed. Others believed he had been cursed, unable to escape his obsession. But the truth, as always, lay much deeper than any simple explanation. The horse knew something. He felt pain greater than physical pain. There was something in that land, in that tomb, that cried out for his presence. It was a cloudy morning when something unusual happened. As Shadow once again stood before the grave, as he did every day, the mood began to change. The wind intensified, and a feeling of restlessness took over the farm. The horse, which had always remained silent and calm in its vigil, now seemed agitated. He neighed strangely, almost like a muffled scream, as if he was trying to communicate something urgent. His eyes, once opaque and full of mystery, were now amplified by an expression of fear. It was then that something moved, something invisible, but present. The earth around the tomb shook slightly. Shadow, with his sharp instinct, took a step back, neighing again. The ground seemed to pulse, as if something beneath it was trying to emerge. It was at that moment that the horse, with surprising speed, did what it had never done before. It ran away. It was no ordinary escape, but a desperate run, as if a greater force was pushing him away. He didn't stop until he reached the edge of the farm, where the pasture ended and the dense woods began. There, in a moment of pure distress, Shadow stopped and looked back, his chest heaving, his eyes still filled with dread. What had he felt? What had driven him to run away? Something was wrong, and the horse knew it, but he still didn't understand what was happening. As he recovered from his frantic run, something, or someone, seemed to be watching him. From the line where the woods and farm met, a figure emerged. It was a woman, with dark clothes and a serious face. She didn't seem to mind the horse's presence. His attention was fixed on the field, more specifically on the tomb. Shadow, his heart pounding, felt a strange connection with her. Something about the woman seemed familiar, and at the same time, unsettling. The woman slowly approached the tomb, and something inside Shadow made him follow her despite his fear. He watched her with attentive eyes as she began to make silent gestures on the earth, as if she were performing some kind of ritual. The horse felt a chill, something that went beyond fear. He got closer and closer, hoping to understand what was happening. But with each step, he felt as if something was pulling him towards the center of that field. That's when the woman turned around, looking directly at the horse. His eyes, dark as night, glowed with an intensity that made Shadow instinctively flinch. She seemed to know him, like she had been waiting for him, like she knew everything about him. And then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, "You can't run away from what's buried here." It was enough for the horse to feel excruciating pain, a sense of loss and deep fear. But what was buried there? What was he really seeing? The woman, without saying anything else, slowly walked away, and Shadow, with his heart racing, stood still, watching her disappear into the trees. Something was emerging on the horizon, something that he still didn't fully understand, but that he knew would change his life forever. From that day on, Shadow could no longer ignore the call of the grave. The encounter with the woman had shaken his certainties and his routine. Something was deeply wrong, and the horse felt he must discover what was hidden in the land he so avoided. For days, he roamed the farm from one end to the other, finding no peace. His steps inevitably led him to the tomb, but there was always something that prevented him from approaching it completely. With each failed attempt, Shadow felt more involved in a cycle of anxiety and anguish, There was something in the earth that he needed to understand, a force that pulled him toward it, but at the same time pushed him away. The nights were the hardest. The feeling that something was watching him kept him alert, and he could barely rest. However, something else began to rise within him, a desire to face that fear and discover the truth, no matter the cost. It was a cold morning when he decided he would face the tomb head-on. He didn't know what he would find, but he felt that he could only find peace if he faced once and for all what terrified him. His steps were firm, his heart was racing. As he approached the tomb area, the wind began to blow more strongly, and the surrounding trees began to move, as if aware of his presence. The cloudy sky seemed to weigh on him, like a great layer of pressure. Finally, he reached the tomb. The smell of fresh earth seemed stronger than ever. The horse stopped and watched intently, as if waiting for something to happen. Nothing. The field was silent, as always, but there was a palpable feeling in the air, a tension he couldn't ignore. With a determined movement, Shadow began to dig with his paws, tearing the earth with force. With each movement, the feeling that something was revealing itself intensified. The layers of earth were being removed, and the horse continued, relentless. The pain in his paws didn't matter anymore. He felt like he was searching for something bigger. And then, when he felt he had dug enough, something strange happened. The earth gave way, and Shadow found himself in front of a metallic object, covered in dirt and rust. With his nose, the horse touched the object, feeling a wave of cold and unsettling energy run through his body. He began to remove more earth from around it, and as he did so, the object became more visible. It was a box, small, made of metal, with old marks, as if it had been buried a long time ago. Shadow's heart skipped a beat. He knew that was the key to what was happening. With a desperate effort, the horse used its paws to push the box out of the ground. When she finally left, the surrounding environment seemed to change. The wind stopped. The sky darkened even more, as if the universe itself was waiting for the revelation. Shadow turned away from the box, watching her with wide eyes. He knew his journey was just beginning. Whatever was inside that box would change everything. Something much bigger than he could imagine was about to be revealed. The horse didn't know what to expect when he opened the box, but something inside him urged him to continue. The rusty metal of the box clanked unsettlingly against the ground, and with each movement, a dense energy seemed to emanate from it, as if the very ground was shaking beneath its hooves. Shadow backed away a little, but his eyes were fixed on the object. He could no longer go back. Something had awakened in him, something very old, and the curiosity that consumed him was now stronger than any fear. With a quick movement, he used his front paws to open the box, which clicked, releasing thick smoke that seemed to envelop the horse and the earth around him. Shadow coughed, but didn't move away. He knew something important was about to happen. As the smoke cleared, the sight before him revealed what was inside. A small statue, made of an unknown material, covered in runes and symbols that seemed to glow faintly. The horse felt a shiver run down his spine, as if he had touched something sacred and profane at the same time. The statue seemed to emanate an almost palpable energy. Shadow, with his eyes fixed on her, felt a wave of pain invade his chest, a deep and overwhelming pain, as if he were forced to relive an old suffering. He took a step back, almost tripping over his own paws, and for the first time, he felt like he was losing control. It was as if something was forcing his mind to open forgotten doors, to remember moments he had never wanted to remember. The statue began to shine with a cold, intense light. The horse stared at the symbols, feeling an increasing pressure, as if time and space itself were being distorted. The wind blew again, but now it was different. The earth seemed to vibrate, and the trees around him began to move, as if they were alive, watching him. The sky darkened even further, and a figure began to emerge from the shadow. Shadow felt a chill run down his spine, but he couldn't stop. Something compelled him to continue, not to take his eyes off the statue. The figure that had appeared out of nowhere, with the appearance of a hooded woman, slowly approached Shadow. His footsteps were silent, but his presence was overwhelming. She looked at the horse with a serious expression, and in one smooth movement, extended her hand towards the statue. When his fingers touched the cold surface of the object, an explosion of light and sound shook the field, and Shadow felt like the ground was opening up beneath his feet. "You were destined to find this," the woman said, her voice deep and full of power. "Now you will need to make a choice." The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating off the walls of his mind. Shadow was paralyzed, unable to move. He felt like he was on the edge of an abyss, with the world falling apart around him. The woman's figure came even closer, and her eyes, as black as night, shone with an unearthly intensity. "You must decide," she said again. "Stay here and succumb to what is buried, or go out into the unknown, searching for answers you cannot understand." The woman stared at Shadow, as if she was expecting something. The horse, his heart racing and his body shaking, knew that the choice he had before him was not a simple one. He was facing something much bigger than himself, something that defied his own understanding of reality. He knew that whatever he decided, nothing would be the same as before. The wind increased, and the horse felt an immense force taking over his body. His mind was overcome by a strange, disturbing feeling, as if he were moving away from reality, falling deeper into an abyss of darkness. He felt pulled, unable to resist the force that enveloped him. The choice was made, but Shadow didn't fully understand the consequences of his decision. When he touched the statue with his front paw, something profound and intense happened. The ground beneath him opened with a crash, and he was swallowed by darkness. But contrary to what might be expected, there was no pain. Instead, a feeling of tranquility enveloped him, as if he were being taken to an unfamiliar, yet familiar place. The horse felt that its journey was not over, but rather transformed. When his eyes opened again, he was in a different field. There were no trees or tombs there, but an expanse of golden light, as if the sky itself was embracing him. He stood up, still dazed, and noticed that around him the world seemed to have calmed down. He was no longer in the dark farm field, nor surrounded by the presence of the hooded woman. Everything seemed perfect, unchanging, and yet there was something unsettling about that peace. As Shadow walked, something began to form before him. It was not a human being or an animal, but a presence, an entity. She appeared as a glowing figure, shrouded in soft light, and as she approached, he felt an inexplicable connection, a feeling that somehow he had always known this would happen. The entity spoke, its voice a gentle melody that touched the deepest fibers of Shadow's soul. "You made the right choice," the entity said, its voice full of serenity. "But the truth is more complex than you can understand. The journey you began was not just about finding what was buried, but about understanding your purpose, about facing the fears that, like shadows, hide in the depths of your being." Shadow looked at the figure, his eyes widening with the feeling that there was something he didn't yet know, something fundamental about his own existence, something that was related to that tomb and the hooded woman. "You will be the guardian of something much bigger than yourself, something the world knows nothing about," the entity continued. "You now carry the burden and blessing of knowing that sometimes darkness leads us to what we need to understand. The tomb was not just a place of death, but a place of revelation. What was buried there was a secret you now know." Shadow, his heart pounding, was unable to respond. He didn't know what it meant to be the guardian of something so great. But somewhere inside he felt that this was his destiny. The horse now had a new purpose, a purpose that went beyond its own existence. With one last look at the entity, Shadow began to walk away, sensing that something new and significant was about to reveal itself. He still didn't fully understand what had happened, but he knew that the darkness had been overcome, and that he was now part of something greater, something that transcended human understanding. The land he had feared so much was now no longer a prison, but a portal to the unknown, a space where he could truly be free. And so, with the light of the new dawn shining upon him, Shadow moved forward, knowing that his journey was far from over. The horse, now wiser and stronger, would continue his journey, no longer as a lost being, but as one who had found the truth and with that, won his freedom.